To God be the glory. Kindly open your Bibles to the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 1 to 28. 1 Samuel chapter 1, 21 to verse 1 to 28. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Suphite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tuho, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. He had two wives. One was called Hannah, and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were priests of the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah would say to her, "Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons?" Once when they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on his chair by the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and do not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head." As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunk and said to her, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." "Not so, my lord," Hannah replied. "I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief." Eli answered, "Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of him." She said, "May your servant find favor in your eyes." Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Early the next morning, they arose and worshiped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, "Because I asked the Lord for him." When her husband Elkanah went up with all his family to offer the annual sacrifice to the Lord and to fulfill his vows, Hannah did not go. She said to her husband, "After the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always." "Do what seems best to you," her husband Elkanah told her. "Stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good his word." So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she had weaned him. After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine. and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my Lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." And he worshiped the Lord there. May God bless us upon the reading of his words. I understand that this passage may have some cultural issues, and we do not belong to that culture, so we may not understand the details of that particular culture. But what we are interested today is to know what kind of a family God would use. If it is an honor for a family to be chosen by the leader of a country, for example, a newly elected leader of a country would choose a family that would minister to the people, it would be a great joy and honor for a family to be chosen by God for his ministry. And there are three things I believe that we can learn from this passage. And the first is that God would use a family for his ministry when this family is a worshiping family. Hannah and her husband Elkanah went to the tabernacle to worship God. And at this time, there was only one place in Israel where people are allowed to worship. There were no local churches at that time. And if you can imagine, if there was only one place where people could go, so from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west, they would gather just in one place, at least once a year. And it was a long journey for some people. But this family went there to worship God. And what I like about this is that when people go to a certain place to congregate and have a public worship, these people were already worshiping God while they were at home. Families worship together at home, and then when they come together as a community, as a congregation, they come as a family. There was one instance that I had a conversation with an elder of the church. The church is so remote that he said, for 15 years, we do not have a full-time pastor. And I said, do you still worship every Sunday? And he said, yes. Even if we do not have a full-time pastor for 15 years, we still come together because from Monday to Saturday, we were already worshiping at home. During the early days of the Alliance, we were familiar with the family altar. I don't know if you are still doing that in your homes, where the father and the mother would gather the children before going to sleep, read the portion of the scriptures, and pray. They do that every day. And on Sunday, they bring their children to church. Not the church as a substitute, but the church as an expansion of their worship in the church. When we were in the elementary grades, our school was quite far, so we had to walk about 5 kilometers to the school. We had no time to go home for lunch. We had to bring our lunch with us. Some of my classmates, they were just living close to the school, and so they invited me to take their lunch with them. And there was this house. They were not Alliance. But when we were there, the father and the mother around the table with the children, and the father said, before we eat our lunch, let's thank God. And that gave an impression to me. These are not even alliance people, but they worship God in their homes, and on Sundays they bring their families to church to worship. And Hannah had only one intention in her mind and in her heart. She was not there to look for something or someone. She was not even interested with high priest Eli. She was not interested with the children of Eli. She was there to pour her heart out to God. When a person worships God, that person cannot be distracted by anything or anyone. In fact, she could have stumbled, she could have been offended because Eli misunderstood her. How many times have we misunderstood someone because we do not know the background of the person? Eli said, lasing siguro tong babaeng ito. Why is he behaving this way? Because Hannah was praying to God, her mouth, her lips were moving, but there was no sound, and Eli concluded that she was drunk. And yet Hannah did not allow that to distract her. Many times when we come to church, if we are not careful, we would be distracted. Distracted with something, distracted with someone. I remember a long time ago, a person suggested, Pastor, mabuti siguro meron tayong dress code. Sabi ko, anong dress code ang gusto mo? Kasi napansin ko, yung iba ang ganda ng damit. Yung iba, hindi maganda ang damit. Yung iba magpunta sa church, halos wala ng damit. Distractions. Hannah was there for only one purpose, and that was to worship her God, regardless of what was around her. She was not interested with those things. She was interested only with God. And she poured her heart out. She was in anguish. She was suffering. I don't know if you can classify this situation with domestic violence. Of course, she was not hurt physically because her husband was there to protect her, but she was suffering emotionally and psychologically. How can you live in a house na paggising mo, pag bukas ng mata mo, yung kalaban mo ang nandun? At the person irritates you. The rival irritates her because she had children and she had none. And so she poured herself out to God. And I believe this is the first thing that we should consider. If you want God to use your family for His service, that family should be a worshiping family. Hannah worshiped God. The second thing I believe that God is looking for when He wants to use a family is that Hannah, after she poured her heart out to God, and after she received the word from Eli, although Eli at first misunderstood her, but then when he realized that this woman was asking something from God and pouring her out to God, he made a declaration that may God grant you your desire. And Hannah's desire was to have a son. Because in that culture, a woman is nothing without a husband. That's one of the reasons why they allowed polygamy at that time, because of wars, natural calamities. Women who do not have husbands would die, especially during winter, because there was no provision for them. And if she does not have a son, the moment the husband dies, she would be kicked out from the house. We might not realize that because today, we don't have that culture. In their culture, a woman has no social security. And she was asking God for a son. And she waited. Not only that she worshiped, she was willing to wait. How many times we missed God's purpose because we failed to wait? Remember Sarah, the wife of Abraham? God already promised to her, you will have a son. And she said, oh, we are already old. And she manipulated. How many times we try to manipulate to get what we desire? And we end up having troubles. But Hannah was willing to wait. No matter how long it takes. I don't know how you can live with a situation like that. Every day, there is trouble at home. Every day, you are being ridiculed. You are being humiliated by people inside your home. But Hannah waited. And in the course of time, she got pregnant. And she received what she desired from God. Many, many times we are in a hurry. We want things to be done now. We are living in a world of instants. And we want God to instantly answer our prayers. Phillips Brooks, a very popular preacher and writer in the early 1900s, was invited by many churches, and every time he spoke, people would come, and his ministry was so successful. But then one day, his wife noticed that he was walking back and forth. He was walking back and forth. And the wife said, Phillips, what's your problem? He did not answer. But the woman was insistent. Tell me, what's your problem? And Phillips Brooks said, I am in a hurry, but God is not. How frustrating is that? You want something to be done. You want something to happen. You are in a hurry. You cannot wait. But Hannah, she waited. Not only that she worshiped God, she waited. And I think the third thing that inspires me in this passage is that God can use a family that will not withhold anything from God. Worship, wait, and when you experience the blessing, you do not withhold the best from God. Hannah asked for a son. When the son was given, she never hesitated to give her son back to God. People may call her crazy. You are asking for a son for many years. Now you are willing to give that away. Of course, Samuel was not abandoned, unlike some children that were left at the stairs of some churches. Samuel was brought to the tabernacle and was offered to God. Hannah did not withhold the best for his God. I don't know how many of us prayed for things, prayed for our desires, and when we have received the answers to our prayers, we seem to have forgotten our promises. Charles Spurgeon, I know some of you have Baptist background. Charles Spurgeon is a very popular Baptist pastor. Perhaps during his time, he is the only person who can fill a 5,000 capacity auditorium. That's how good he was. And he was invited by many churches. One day, a person from one particular church wrote him a letter. Pastor, please come to our church and please preach sermons that would inspire our people so that we can raise money to pay our debt. Meron pala mga simbahan, may mga utang. So this person said, Pastor, come and preach to our people so that we can raise money, so we can pay our debt. I'll take care of your expenses. You can stay in one of my resorts, or in one of my mansions, or in one of my 5-star hotels. So this person was very rich. He told in the letter, Pastor Spurgeon, just come. Don't worry about anything. I'll take care of everything. Just preach messages that will inspire people to give so that we can pay our debt. Reverend Spurgeon replied in a letter, and he said, I decline your invitation. Sell one of your resorts, one of your mansions, one of your hotels, and pay the debt. Many times we want others, not us. Hannah did not withhold the best from his God. I believe that a family that is a worshiping family, a family that waits upon God, and a family that will not withhold anything from God will be used for His glory. I just read a story while preparing this message about a 7-year-old girl. There was a 7-year-old girl who loved the Lord so much. Even at a very young age, she said, how I wish I can participate in missions. Imagine a 7-year-old would ask, how can I participate in missions? One day, a missionary visited the church where she was, and she was very happy. Here is a missionary. And she got a penny. I don't know how much a penny compared to centavos. She had a penny, a very small coin. And she gave it to the missionary. And she said, use this for the missions work. And the missionary looked at the penny and said, sao man ako ni? Unsa may mapalit ani? And he thought, as I will buy one gospel tract. You know, there were days before the internet. They were printing tracts, and we distribute tracts. One tract is 1 penny. And so this missionary bought a gospel tract, and he went to Africa. When he arrived there, he gave this gospel tract to the village chieftain, the chief. And the chief was very happy that the missionary gave him a gift, but he could not read. So he called someone. When the missionary left, he called someone, please read this aloud so that I could hear the message, my family, and the people around me. And so when the gospel tract was read, the chief knelt down, the family members knelt down, and hundreds of the tribesmen knelt down, accepting the Lord Jesus Christ through the reading of a gospel tract worth 1 penny coming from a 7-year-old girl. God will use you, your family. When we come to worship, we wait for His will to be accomplished in our lives, and we will never withhold the best from our God. To God be the glory.